especially this room. This is my favorite room in JNU. I mean, so many people. Wow, it's just how. Okay, I have 12 points that I've got to make. I've got to make them in 15 minutes. I don't think I can make all of them. So just alert me 3 minutes before the time gets over. I'll make the final points. I readily agreed to become a discussant for this book because of my own opposition to postcolonial theory. It's a paper.
Thank you.
I mean, as a master's student, long time ago, I felt I was dumb. I just couldn't understand this. I've always considered, I mean, I'm not very smart, but I'm not that dumb either. Okay? Now, the point about the impenetrability, the density, the obscurity of this writing is what really gets to me. कहना क्या चाहते हैं आप? I mean, I tried to read Gayatri Chakravarty Spivak's essay, Can the Subaltern Speak, at least 3 times. I couldn't make out whether the subaltern can speak or not. No, this is bad academic writing. It's very bad academic writing. I think Homi Bhabha got the prize for bad academics 1 year. These are not good academic practices. Okay, it makes young, naive, bhola bhala students like me feel very dumb. Secondly, somewhere I read, I think aapki kitab mein, in your book I've read that postcolonial theory began when third world intellectuals arrived at the first world university. This was a form of crass careerism in which a certain USP was created of how we are different. And ultimately what it's done is a form of exoticization, a form of selling the subaltern, the innocence of the subaltern. And I think we have to call it out for what it was. For far too long, I think this whole thing has gone on. And in terms of the large subaltern studies collective, postcolonial theory, the careers that have been made out of this, and now we see the political fallout of this. Now, as a student in the 1990s, somewhere at the back of my mind felt, oh God, what are these guys doing? This was the rise of Hindutva forces. In 1983, Sumit Sarkar had written an essay in the EPW where he had pointed this out very specifically. Yes. And we have to keep this in mind. Were you naive? Couldn't you read the tea leaves of Indian Chai Pa Charcha? Right. The tea leaves of Indian politics around that time? Couldn't you see where this was going? And now we see the fallout of this, and there must be a certain holding to account in terms of this. Academia is not done in ivory towers. There is a certain political fallout of this particular kind of, the spinning of these yarns of theory that we have seen. Now, this spinning of yarns of theory that I talked about this in class yesterday, I think has to do with the particular character of the neoliberal university that many of these third world intellectuals migrated to. Increasingly, this was a university that was being shut off from the concerns of the world, specifically the concerns of the working class. And when you had the neoliberalization of the university, you have the university being transformed into a kind of assembly line of publication. And I think this is what postcolonial theory and subaltern studies has done. It has kind of fed into this particular demand of a certain kind of academic industriousness, where you have to kind of keep spinning out yarns and yarns of theory, which is, I think, what has happened. Now, as I said, the fallout has been particularly problematic. Now, I won't go into too many of the details because you've already pointed that out. But the constant references to Weimar Germany are indicative of the dangers that we are going through. Now, I keep making this point, and I don't want to sound apocalyptic, I don't want to sound overly dramatic, but this is what we are living through right now. Now, my point once again is, couldn't postcolonial theorists understand this? Couldn't they see where this is going? And again, this goes back to the problem of academia and the university itself. In academia, we have this strange kind of a framework fetishization. A particular kind of academic framework becomes fashionable at a particular time, and then there are certain people who are very, very influential in terms of creating them, and then there are young, naive graduate students who have to latch onto it because of career concerns. And I think this is what explains the great success of postcolonial theory and subaltern studies. It's as simple as that. Now, when one of my students came and told me about decolonial theory 7-8 years, I didn't know much about it. But at the back of my mind, I said, can't you see the political fallout of this? Okay, when you, and of course the Sai Deepak endorsement happened after that, Minolo, it was retracted of course. Yeah. But it just goes to show you. And I am, there are lots of young students here. I am trying to alert many young students, don't fall for fetishized academic frameworks. Because postcolonial theory and subaltern studies was an instance of a fetishized academic framework, where academia and academic writing becomes kind of a logic unto itself. We go on spinning these yarns of theory, unmindful of what exactly is going on. And as I said, the structure of the neoliberal university contributed very much to this particular configuration and success of postcolonial theory and subaltern studies. I'll just make a very, very brief reference to the particular manner of reading Gramsci. I remember Ejaz Ahmed, who was a visiting professor in CPS. I remember long conversations, and of course I remember reading his essay, Reading Gramsci in the Times of Hindutva. Now, it's prescient. Go back, read it. The lecture was given in 1991. This is the beginning of India's liberalization policy. And the question he asks, what happens if the genie of the aspirations that liberalization releases does not fulfill itself? Will we look at full-on fascism? Yes, here we are. Yeah. This is what we are. What liberalization could not deliver in terms of the kind of aspirations that the Modi government really appealed to when it first came to power, this is what we are witnessing now. We are witnessing the fallout of the failure of liberalization in terms of being able to really cater to the whims and the aspirations of a particular aspirational middle class, as it's called. Again, going back to the 1990s when a lot of this theory was being written, it seems to be completely oblivious to these political developments, and therefore I urge a reading of Ejaz Ahmed's essay, written 35 years ago, and look at how prescient it is in terms of being able to say, well, this is what's going to happen. Also, Ejaz would keep making this point that the whole point about including the subaltern is so highly eclectic. It's like going to the shopping mall and picking out, I want this particular brand of chocolate or whatever it is. Now, you cannot read Gramsci by divorcing Gramsci from the inextricable, indispensable Enlightenment and Marxian background, which is exactly what the postcolonials have done. And this is why we have reached this particular kind of, where we have to discuss postcolonial theory in this particular way. I'll skip these points. All right, let me come to the whole point about the excoriation of the elites that one finds. This particular manner in which nationalist historiography was excoriated for, I think somewhere Dipesh Chakravarty or one of the postcolonials calls it a spiritual biography of the Indian elites. I think it's Dipesh Chakravarty who makes this particular point. Now, again, what I'm urging people to think about, again, Professor Nanda, you pointed this out, is that particular excoriation of the elites that one finds in subaltern studies, you can see it being replicated in today's populist politics. Now, I'm not for a minute trying to make the case for elitism at all, by no means. All that I'm saying is that this particular political stance, this particular populist stance of excoriating elites will give us what we have. So it's basically a case of being, the Nehruvian elite was all elites are bad, all elites are despicable, but some elites are worse than others. What we have now is an instance of a bad elite being replaced by a much worse elite. It's literally out of the frying pan and into the fire. Also, let me just say one more thing. This is again a point that you did make. One of my favorite books, I haven't read it very extensively, but it's by a South Korean economist whose name I always forget. He teaches at Cambridge. It's called Kicking the Ladder Away. Now, this particular... Hajun Chang, so thank you. I always forget names these days. But this particular manner of saying that science is bunkum is actually, you made this point, for you science was a form of upward mobility. Now, it is a particular manner of kicking the ladder away, precisely at that moment when the subaltern, dare I use that particular term, is trying to find avenues of upward mobility in the form of English language. You decide to very cruelly kick that particular ladder away. Now, therefore, what we have here is a particular very condescending attitude towards the subaltern here. Because if anything, what the subaltern would require, demands, is particularly a particular manner of upward mobility. What gives you that? A scientific temperament, and of course the English language for whatever historical reasons. Now, precisely at that moment, I see a particular excoriation of elites, an excoriation of English, an excoriation of the scientific temperament. Again, let me skip this. I'm going to make 3 more points, and I'm going to spend a little more time on this, but I'll finish in 15 minutes, don't worry. Provincializing Europe, I'm intrigued by this particular term.
Me too.
When I first read this book, when it came out, I didn't read it very carefully. But then I heard Jaishankar speak. Heard of Jaishankar? In 2022, at a conference in Bratislava, he made this point. He's good with words. Okay, he made this point that Europe must come out of this particular tendency of thinking of its problems as the world's problems. I heard those lines and I said, oh, that's provincializing Europe. Now, the book, again, is an example of bad post-colonial writing in the sense that it takes a lot of time to understand what exactly he means by historicism. Okay, the idea of a certain development and movement towards, it took me a long time to really wrap my head around what exactly the term historicism means. But to come back to my point, I'm going to make a larger geopolitical point here, which is slightly away from the discussion of this book. This is really a time to consider Europe. Okay? Look at what is happening to Europe. The poor Europeans have been ditched by the Americans. Right. I mean, can you believe it? In Greenland, European countries have sent forces to deter the Americans. Never in my lifetime did I think this would happen. Now, what we are witnessing right now is Europe becoming basically a poor promontory, a kind of a peninsula, jutting out from the Eurasian landmass. This really is the moment of provincializing Europe. Yep. Not in the way that Dipesh Chakravarty is talking about it, but the whole point is Europe's problem, the nation state, is today's major political problem. And in the 21st century, the two major nation state problems are European nation state problems. I'm talking about Gaza, Israel as being a European settler outpost, and Ukraine. And India, I think on both counts, we have been on the wrong side of history, as we say. So if there is a case for provincializing Europe, certainly. We are witnessing right in front of our eyes, geopolitically speaking, Europe becoming a poor peninsula or a promontory because of the way that the Americans have ditched it, the way that Russia is looming large and Russian winters have always threatened Europe. But this is not, but the way that Dipesh Chakravarty provincialized Europe is certainly not the way to provincialize it. Just one point of slight difference, if I may make this point. When you talk about, again, I'm largely in agreement with the book and the argument as a whole, but when it comes to the whole question of the Enlightenment, I have always tried to make a differentiation between the mainstream 18th century Enlightenment, as we have known it, and a pre-Enlightenment, call it a penumbra or the shadow lines of that Enlightenment, which is into the 17th century. And I would suggest that if one were to take a slightly more historically and philosophically broader view of the Enlightenment, we could actually make a larger and more effective political case for reviving the very Enlightenment itself. So when I was reading the book, I felt that there was a certain kind of how do I put this? But an inability to differentiate the different strands of the Enlightenment. The very same case can actually be reinforced by referring to certain strands of the early 17th century Enlightenment. I specifically have in mind, let's say, strands of the Enlightenment, like the English Enlightenment, the Scottish Enlightenment. So those were the strands. So that's a slight point of disagreement. Let me make my final point. I haven't read Said Deepak, but for some reason the algorithmic feed sends me. Now this is dangerous, because what I see, he's a lawyer. What I see is an attack on the Constitution itself. It's very clear.
It is.
It is. There is an attack on the Constitution. Now, why is this so significant? The Constitution, as a liberal document, gives certain rights, it's premised on a certain rights-based individuality. And it's precisely this rights-based individuality that is under attack right now. And therefore, what decoloniality does, that it creates a certain kind of a didacticism of duties. Okay, you'll find this in the Prime Minister's speeches. So what we are witnessing in terms of the beating of India into subjugation is the complete evisceration of the rights-based constitutional order that so many of us have been brought up on, and its replacement with what I refer to as a didacticism of duties. Do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do that. Now this is a threat to any kind of free, open society. I mean, the first time I read historicism was actually in Karl Popper. And it took me a long time to understand, the poverty of historicism and the historicism that Dipesh Chakravarty is talking about. So therefore it took me a long time to wrap my head around this. So to come back to my point, this is really where we are. It is this particular kind of a very precipitous slide down into what I call a didacticism of duties. Where will it get us? Well, it'll create what I can only call a state of ministrations. Okay, I'm done, this last point. A state of ministrations. Now what does that mean? That means you will have political leaders who will use their political office as a bully pulpit to minister to people. Citizens no longer, but people who will be ministered to in terms of reminding them, this is what you must do. If you don't do it, you're in trouble. And I think postcolonial theory has really contributed to this dire state of affairs. I'll end there.